I don't know if you guys know Steven Anderson. This is him on screen. He is the leader of the NIFB. Hateful, vile sack of shit. I don't know how else to say it. Let's listen to what he has to say here. He's about to explain to us the difference between his little cult, the NIFB, and the broader Independent Fundamental Baptist movement. Let me just show you the type of guy that we're working with here, okay? Let's start with this, and then we'll get into his little explanation in a second. I just want you to know what type of person he is.
First of all, let me start out by saying this. I don't give a rip about this election. I don't give a rip about politics.
This is about the 2024 election, I believe.
I checked out of politics a long time ago. I quit voting many, many years ago, many elections ago. I'm not voting.
I don't know that that's true, but his other pastors in the NIFB openly say they vote for Trump, so.
I don't care. It's the two wings of the same bird, false left-right paradigm, Republicrats and Democrats, and I'm not falling for it anymore. I've woken up to the left-right paradigm a long time ago, the false left-right paradigm. Coke and Pepsi are the two choices. No thanks, I'll have a water, okay? But here's the thing. Our country has sunken to such a moral low that today we have the candidate for vice president of the United States of America as a literal whore.
So this must be in, I mean, my thing here says 2021, but if she was a candidate at the time, then I guess this must have been in 2020, like before the election actually took place, right? A literal whore, he says. Okay, go on.
A literal whore. You know how that woman, Kamala Harris, you know how she got started in politics? She got started in her late 20s, sleeping with a married man who was 60 years old.
This is a lie. That was spread by the Trump campaign, a lie that she slept her way to the top, basically. That is not true.
And then he appointed her to political office.
This whole thing is a lie, all of it.
Let that sink in for a moment. Here you have a woman in her late 20s, goes to bed with a 60-year-old man. You think she's just really into 60-year-olds?
Hey, you don't know. Maybe she is.
And then that 60-year-old man, the mayor of San Francisco, Willie Brown, just happened to appoint her to political office.
Like, this whole thing is fictitious, as I said. This is all made up.
That's how she got her start in politics, by being a literal whore. And this is not some wild conspiracy theory. This is mainstream media. This is a fact. This is a known, open fact that this woman has committed whoredom to get where she is today.
It is not a fact.
And the so-called feminists of our nation are rejoicing. Folks, how is that? Can somebody explain to me how that elevates women?
By giving them, what's the word here? By giving them power over their own sexual behavior. They have freedom to do what they want. That's how it elevates women, by letting them make choices for themselves in their own bodies, of course.
Hey, little girls, you want to succeed and be a great person someday like Kamala Harris? Just find some 60-year-old, dirty old man to be your sugar daddy, and you can be whatever you want. You could even be the president of the United States.
Oh, that was the end of it. Yeah, the guy is a complete piece of trash, obviously. So, it's just like a one or two more little bits. If that didn't convince you, watch this one.
If there was no mass cremation.
He's talking about the Holocaust. He's trying to invalidate it, claim that it didn't happen.
Of millions and millions of Jews, then can you really call it the Holocaust anymore? Now, again, we're not saying that Jews didn't die in World War II. And
that kind of sounds a little bit like what you're saying.
That Jews were not even murdered in World War II. Lots of people were murdered in World War II. There were all kinds of casualties on both sides. And the thing about it is that just because people were rounded up and put in forced labor camps, that does not mean that they were systematically exterminated and cremated.
What a colossal piece of shit, really. How much of a piece of shit do you have to be to fabricate this trash? Untold amounts of suffering took place because of what Hitler was doing. And this sack of shit refuses to even acknowledge it. Just disgusting.
To the tune of 6 million. You know, keep in mind the United States rounded up Japanese people and put them in a concentration camp, okay? But honestly,
Yeah, but we're not talking about concentration camps. We're talking about death camps here. We're talking about camps that were literally constructed with the intent to mass exterminate groups of people based on their, like, ethnicity. Japanese people's rights were violated terribly in the United States during World War II kind of era, but not in the same way that the Nazis violated Jews' rights. So I don't want to hear it. This is just straight up disgusting, honestly.
these camps, Auschwitz, Treblinka, and others, were probably forced labor camps, not death camps or execution camps. You see, the Germans wanted the Jews working to fuel their war machine.
That's true, and that's why, as is described by Elie Wiesel, for example, famously in his book Night, they would bring a group of Jews to the concentration camp, and they would line them up, and they would send the heads of certain departments down the line to decide which ones stayed. Mengele particularly would, that evil fucking doctor would go down the line and would tell people left or right. And whichever direction he pointed, to the left was you become a slave working to fuel the war effort on Germany's behalf, and right is the crematorium. So he would go down the line, and those that were too weak to work, too young, too old, or women were sent to the crematorium. Working age men in the range of 14 to 50 or so were sent to work in the the factories or whatever, depending on what they were building or what they were manufacturing or mining. That's how it worked there for like the longest time. Many people were exterminated. I think it was somewhere in the vicinity of 800,000 were exterminated in the Auschwitz complex, which included more than just the main building. It was, and it included more than just the people that were intentionally exterminated. It was people who were worked to death also. There was a lot of that. Anyway, it's just like vile, disgusting that this guy would be out here denying the Holocaust like this. Just what is wrong with this piece of trash, honestly?
I mean, they had drafted every man that was able-bodied into their military, especially toward the end. I mean, they're drafting 16-year-olds, they're drafting 45-year-olds, because they're just trying to get as many soldiers out there on the field. And they needed people working to make the bullets, the tanks, the equipment to keep the war machine going. And
yep, that's true. They did have them working to manufacture shit. Absolutely.
So they were using the Jews for forced labor in these camps. Actually,
some of them. They were using some of them. The ones that were valuable for that purpose. Yes. But they worked them until they died. I mean, depending on which camp you're talking about. I wrote about this at length, by the way. If you want to give it a read, Was Hitler an Atheist? Amazon and Audible. Some camps, lifespan, if you like, the average life expectancy of some people in these camps was 16 months. Like, you would make it 16 months in these camps, or even 8 months before you died in some of them. In others, it was longer because, like, they were more political prisoner camps. Some of them contained, like, privileged prisoners. Like, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a privileged prisoner because he was internationally famous and could be used to gain concessions in an international negotiation, because he drew attention. Martin Niemöller is another one that was internationally famous, so they kept him at, I believe, Saxenhausen first, and then Dachau second. He went there for the last 4 years of the war, and was released after it was freed, or maybe it was the other way around. I'm pretty sure it was Saxenhausen first. Anyway, the point is that they wouldn't work the political prisoners into the ground because they wanted them to be healthy enough to trade later if they needed to. But at the end, Hitler realized that, like, this is kind of a lost cause, that this isn't going to get him where he wants to be. So he just had Bonhoeffer, for example, executed just like that when he found out that he had worked with Canaris to betray him and everything else.
That makes a lot more sense when you look at the facts.
Average life expectancy for Dachau was 21 weeks. Interesting. So that's 4 months? Is that 4 months or 5 months? 5.5, give or take? Yeah, it was ugly. Real ugly shit. Saxenhausen was more of a political prisoner type of deal for the most part, but it was also a work camp. I think when Niemöller, the dude that wrote the poem First It Came for the Communists, and I said nothing because it wasn't a communist, then the socialists, so on, when he was sent to his last stop, I believe he was just glad to be out of solitary because he had spent all that time in his previous camp in solitary confinement, and he was down the hall from the torture chambers. So day in and day out, he sits in solitary for 4 years, practically, give or take, depending on how you measure it. He spent like 7 months in solitary in one jail, and then he went to Saxenhausen for like 3 years or something like that. Roughly 4 years in solitary while listening to people get tortured. That is some shit right there. And on top of that, while he was there, the war started. So he was sent to the concentration camp, I believe, in 1937. And then the war started in 1939. And he applied, or he wrote a letter, basically, requesting permission to join the Navy after the war started. 2 years into his solitary confinement stay. That is wild shit, right? So that the point is, that's Steven Anderson, just a colossal sack of shit. I've got a ton of stuff from him, but I want to listen to his breakdown of what the NIFB is. We're just going to jump in from here, and I'll put that back at the start.
Within the IFB. So you've got the Independent Fundamentalist Baptists, and they're kind of on the decline. They're watering down. They're scaling back, soul winning, whatever. So then you have a new, vibrant, renewed revival movement within the IFB, which we're calling the new IFB. But the new IFB is not exactly the same as the old IFB in its heyday. There are some distinct differences between the old IFB and the new IFB. The new IFB is not just taking the old IFB and just, getting fired up and getting back to the original principles, but rather there are some distinct differences, and that's what I want to talk about in this video. Now, first of all, let me just talk about the similarities. First of all, they're both Independent Fundamental Baptists. What does it mean to be independent? It means we're not part of a denomination. We're totally autonomous. We don't have financial ties with other churches. We stand on our own 2 feet. As Independent Fundamental Baptists, we're not members of any kind of a club or denomination or convention or anything like that. Yeah, we have our pastor friends, but some of us are friends with pastors that others aren't friends with. It's just kind of just a really loose grouping of new IFB churches.
Not really. This video is 5 years old. Nah, even then it wasn't like that. It's a pretty strong grouping, actually. It's a strong grouping of IFB preachers, or of NIFB preachers, that follow Steven Anderson's guidance on everything. Like, this dude makes decisions for the entire organization, for all of the groups, and he leads all of the churches and instructs people to this and that and everything. He runs all of this. He does all of this.
New IFB churches. So we're both independent and we're both fundamentalists. We're both Baptists. So obviously everything that Baptists believe we have in common. Obviously we all believe in the Trinity. We believe in salvation by faith. We believe in the eternal security of the believer. We believe in the verbal inerrancy of Scripture. We can go on about the obvious similarities of the fact that we're independent, we're fundamental, and we're Baptist. But not only that, things that have been retained from the old IFB are that, we're both King James only. We've got soul winning, door to door.
Like, I'm sorry, I'm going to step in here. Why are you King James only? Really, that doesn't make any sense. The King James Bible was written at a time when we didn't have anywhere near as many scrolls and as much access to the ancient languages and stuff that we do now. We know way more about it now than we did then. Why would you go with only that translation? It's dumb as dog shit. It's inaccurate. King James Version inaccurately, incorrectly translates shit into, like, for example, it uses the word unicorn incorrectly. The word doesn't belong in there. It wasn't supposed to be unicorn. Why is it there? And why are you, like, accepting this? Why are you okay with continuing to read it?
Door, knocking on doors, preaching the gospel, not just a door hanger or inviting people to church or something. Hard preaching, the screaming and yelling and beating the pulpit kind of preaching. Clothing standards, meaning that we have the ladies in skirts and dresses that go at least down to the knee, and we've got the men wearing shorts and pants that at least go down to their knee. Traditional music, we sing the old hymns. It's not a rock and roll contemporary style church service, and we're both IFB. So what are some of the differences, though, between the old IFB and the new IFB? Well, the first one that sort of jumps out right away is that the old IFB believed in a pre-trib rapture. Okay, so the old IFB is...
Okay, so old IFB believes that there's going to be a great tribulation, 7 years long, give or take, and in that great tribulation, and before that great tribulation, all of the good people are going to be raptured to heaven. Then, is what I'm reading.
Is pre-trib, and the new IFB is post-trib, pre-wrath. Okay.
Pre-wrath. So, wrath, I assume he means Armageddon. So it's after the tribulation starts, after 7 years of fighting and everything, before God rains down meteors from the sky to kill everybody. That's when his people are raptured. Okay, I see.
Okay, so we believe that the rapture will happen after the tribulation, as Jesus said in Matthew 24:29 through 31, but we believe that it will happen before God pours out his wrath. So at the sixth seal, sun and moon are darkened. After the tribulation, sun and moon are darkened, Jesus comes in the clouds, and then after the rapture, then he pours out his wrath on the earth. So we're post-trib, pre-wrath. Old IFB is pre-trib, and that's a big thing that for the old IFB, they get really emotional about that, and they get
God, he always has to, like, insult people. Really
upset when you question them on the pre-trib rapture. But frankly, they're wrong, and so that's why this change took place from old IFB to new IFB. Another big difference between the old IFB and the new IFB is that the old IFB would separate the family, meaning that they'll put the kids in junior church, they'll put the babies in the nursery, and they'll take your kids and send them off to all these different places with all...
I think that's a fine idea, actually. If you're going to church, I think it's useful for children to be in a different, like, chamber than the parents, because it gives you an opportunity to tailor the message to the listener. When I was a Jehovah's Witness, I'd sit there and listen to these people talk as boring as sin because I didn't understand what they were saying.
All these different people, whereas the new IFB is family integrated, meaning that our church service contains every member of the family. So every baby, toddler, child, teenager, adult are all in the same church service. We all gather together in one place for church. And some of the reasons for this have to do with the fact that we're living in perilous times. And there are so many weirdos and predators that creep into churches that, frankly, I wouldn't want to just go to a church and have my kids being taken off to some other building, some other class with...
Well, you don't have to send them to another building. You can send them to, like, the basement with multiple people. That's what they did at my kid's church. My kid used to go to church with a grandma. It was a Methodist, don't hate anybody for anything type of church. And they had a basement that was well lit, and they'd take the kids down there, depending on how old they were, and they would have them draw pictures of Jesus, or they'd have them paint or color or whatever every Sunday. And it was fun, you know, it was just a fun little activity. that people liked to do and the kids liked and everything. And you felt excited to go upstairs to be part of the other observances because you felt like you had, you felt like you'd accomplished something when you get there. Like, that's just a good idea is all, but whatever.
Who knows who? I don't know who they're going with.
You don't really? I mean, you're the head of the church. You should.
I want to watch my own kids and make sure that they're okay, and especially little babies and toddlers and things. So that's why our church doesn't have a nursery. We don't have children's church services. We have them in the main service. But another big reason is we want them to profit from and benefit from the main church service, because even if they're a baby or a toddler, they're like a little sponge just absorbing everything. We want them to learn about church in a real church setting, not in a kind of dumbed down, animal crackers, Kool-Aid, singing a bunch of wild songs.
It needs to be dumbed down because they're dumb. Like, they're children. We're talking about 4-year-olds. Of course it should be dumbed down.
Getting a really watered down Bible lesson. We want to expose them to real preaching from day one. So we have a family integrated church service. We do not separate the family. Another big difference in 2019, and it's really sad to say this, but this is obvious to anyone, is that the old IFB now tolerates the LGBT. Now, they might say, what? We don't tolerate that. They absolutely tolerate the LGBT.
No, they don't.
Virtually every old IFB church in 2019 now says that the LGBT are welcome to attend their services. That's what they say. I mean, that's a fact.
I mean, I think everybody is allowed to attend services pretty much everywhere. It's just, are you going to convert from being gay, quote unquote, is the question, right?
And it's ridiculous, it's bizarre, but that's what they say. They will tolerate them, meaning that they'll say, hey, let's coexist with them. Let's be nice to them, love them, live next door to them.
I mean, didn't Jesus say to love your neighbor? If you think they're sinning, then you can try to change that or whatever. But Jesus would never stand for you refusing to be in a room with somebody. Do you remember the story of the Samaritan that he spoke with? There was a shunning order on Samaritans and he broke it, remember?
Go to church with them. Whatever. Now, obviously, they do not tolerate the sin. They'll basically say that it's sinful, it's wrong, they're against gay marriage. And so they'll condemn the sin, but they will tolerate the LGBT.
This is just nonsense.
People. They tolerate them. Okay, they'll bring them into the service, treat
because they want to convert them, of course.
Them well. Dr. John Getch from West Coast Baptist College just got up and said, that they deserve dignity and respect. So there you go. Over here, the new IFB has zero tolerance for the LGBT and even hates the LGBT. So this is a pretty stark difference. I mean, you're gonna have a hard time.
I don't know. The IFB is pretty hateful, so I don't know what you're talking about here. This is nonsense.
Convincing me or anyone else that the old IFB and the new IFB have the same position on homosexuality. It just isn't true. There's a pretty stark difference here between these two things.
I mean, I think that the new IFB is more vile and hateful and violent toward them. So there's that.
Okay, and then not only that, but the old IFB is Zionist. Okay, and they are also pro-Jewish. Okay.
Oh boy, here we go. Yeah, he is, as I pointed out earlier, very. God, I don't know how else. He's very anti-Semitic. I am opposed to Israel and what they're up to right now, and I'm opposed to Zionism, but I'm not opposed to Jews. What the fuck? These people don't like Jews because they're Jewish. It's insane.
So in a typical old IFB church, they'll have an Israeli flag up on the platform, and they're Zionists, meaning that they believe that the land over in the Middle East belongs to the so-called nation of Israel, and that God gave them that land, and the United States needs to actually support them politically, militarily, financially, if we want to be blessed by God.
Some of them do believe that, yeah.
So the old IFB is very Zionist and very pro-Jewish, meaning that they think that the Jews are God's chosen people and that we were supposed to bless the Jews, and if we bless them, God will bless us and everything like that. Whereas the new IFB is actually anti-Zionist and anti-Jewish. Okay, so
Jesus Christ, dude. I'm sorry. Look, I am in favor of the Palestinians. I am opposed to Zionism. But that's not what these people are. These people fucking hate Jews. There's a distinct difference between being disturbed by what Israelis are doing right now to innocent Palestinians and fucking hating Jews just for religious reasons.
You know, we're against the religion of Judaism. We believe that it's an antichrist religion. If you deny the Son, you don't have the Father, you know, and it's antichrist. We're against the state of Israel. We're against Judaism, and just a totally different viewpoint here. And we believe in what's known commonly as replacement theology or covenant theology. But basically, we do not believe that the Jews are God's chosen people. We believe that Christians are God's chosen people.
That's actually pretty common.
Basically, a spiritual nation made up of Christians has replaced the physical nation made up of, the Israelites. The kingdom of God shall be taken from you and given to a nation bringing forth the fruits thereof. So, they've been replaced. Or you could look at it as that we were grafted in and they were broken off, as Romans 11 teaches. But either way you look at it, at the end of the day, Christians in the New Testament replace Old Testament nation of Israel.
Yeah, I think that's an accurate interpretation of the Bible, in my opinion.
So we're totally anti-Zionist, replacement theology. Another stark difference between the old IFB and the new IFB, and again, the old IFB is not going to like this, but this is very true, is that they have a policy of hiding scandals, okay?
Oh my God. Yeah, that's true, they do. But yeah, Steven Anderson is unique on that front, please. There have been scandals in this church before. Plenty of them. There's one a while back. What was it over? There was, the NIFB did something that people didn't like, or an NIFB preacher came out against Steven Anderson over something. Here, that's right. I remember Steven Anderson was revealed to be an abuser. He abuses his wife and his children, physically hits them with an extension cord. I remember now, his son came out and revealed it, like told the world about it, and said that he did it to his mom too. Steven Anderson did. Left like a C-shaped scar on them from the extension cord. And when asked about it, Steven Anderson, when asked if he hits his wife, he said, whether I engage in spousal discipline is my business, or some shit like that. Oh my God. To even use a term like that is just wild to me for so many reasons. But Salvador Alvarez breaks off from the NIFB as a result. He was a preacher there, and of course he hates gay people just like everyone else, so he doesn't get a pass either. But here's what he said.
So first of all, as many of you may have seen, I have publicly broken fellowship with Pastor Jonathan Shelley, not because of any major doctrinal issues, but because of a huge moral issue, specifically because he does not judge people for hitting children with electrical cords, and because he does not condemn men for doing spousal corporal punishment or spousal discipline on their wives. And when Miriam gave her interview on September 26, I saw Pastor Anderson's reaction of doxing his own family members, and I immediately realized that he was not blameless in this situation. And I plan to make a public statement to disassociate myself and Pure Words Baptist Church from Pastor Steven Anderson. And I was surprised to see Pastor Shelley's email and Facebook post on Monday where he was defending Pastor Anderson. And he admitted in the post that Pastor Steven Anderson hit his teenagers with electrical cords. And also in the post, he was accusing pastors who were standing against abuse, calling them virtue signalers. On Tuesday night, Pastor Shelley had his Baptist Bias episode called Spiritual, and he titled it Spiritual Warfare. He showed clips of old movies where husbands are spanking their wives, and in none of those clips did it seem...
What a weird, just this whole thing is so fucking weird to me, dude. Oh my God.
...that the wife was consenting at all.
I was looking for it because Jonathan Shelley, another NIFB preacher, went all in on this guy. When he released this, Shelley basically accused him of fraud and said that he wrote checks to these people in the church's name and everything. And there's like no evidence of any of it. But Shelley, as evidence, popped up a picture of a check written to somebody from Alvarez's church to like the person. It was just a normal check that was used to just pay for normal services. There was nothing scandalous about any of it, but he didn't blur anything. He had their routing and account number and everything on screen. And it was just vile. God, I wish I could find that now. That sucks that I can't find it. I guess he took it down. But the point is, though, that the NIFB deals with more drama than any other church that I've seen in a while. And Steven Anderson would probably say, oh, well, we're cleaning up the trash. No one else cleans up the trash or whatever. You can lie to yourself and your congregants. You cannot lie to me. We can all see straight through it.
And this just happens over and over again. Whenever they have somebody who's busted being a pervert or a child molester or adultery taking place in the church, any kind of predator like that, they do not openly, publicly blow the whistle on it. They will typically hide scandal. Of course, there are exceptions to this. I'm sure that there are good old IFB churches that would not hide scandal. But over and over and over again, the old IFB hides scandal, sweeps it under the rug, and does not address it. And you'll see the same guys who've been caught being predators, they've been caught being perverts, will just be, shuffled off to another church. They'll go from working on staff at this Bible college to working at a different Bible college, and then they go to a different Bible college.
We're talking about the same thing that happens with police who have abused their power. Is that the kind of process you're referring to? Because if that's what you're referring to, yeah, I'm familiar with it.
And scandal is hidden. Whereas the new IFB just openly exposes scandal.
They start drama and they start shit with other people that is completely unnecessary, actually, is what happens. But all right.
Whatever. If somebody is caught being wicked, being perverted, being a predator, or even just, if a pastor is abusing his position as pastor and involved in wicked sin, we blow the whistle on that. And we've received criticism for that. But you know what? I believe that if a pastor who's in a public position of trust is out, say, visiting prostitutes, stealing money from the church, gambling.
Yeah, this is the whole Alvarez thing, probably, the reference to Alvarez. The dude didn't do anything wrong. He was not gambling or stealing from the church or any of that shit. He was just oppositional to spousal discipline and chose to part ways. And just like that, seemingly out of nowhere, everything gets turned upside down.
And stuff like that has to be publicly exposed. Okay. Not that he just be put in the ministry somewhere else, or, let's sweep that under the rug. And then also in our church, there have been just laymen who've been found out to be predators, perverts. They are not only thrown out of the church, but they're publicly exposed and turned over to the police. Okay. So that's our policy.
That's good. If you're not showing favoritism to one person or one group over another, then good. I'm glad to see that. Unfortunately, I know that Steven Anderson does, in fact, show favoritism, and as does the rest of the church. They show bias. When somebody does something that they don't like, even if that person didn't do anything else worthy of criticism, they slander them with nonsense.
Is that we expose the scandal. You say, well, that makes Christianity look bad. Well, you know what? It's not the people that are exposing wickedness that make Christianity look bad. It's people who are doing the wickedness. That's their fault.
It's you spreading drama. That makes you look fucking bad.
For doing those wicked things. Us blowing the whistle, we're not responsible for the black eye that it gives Christianity.
You're not blowing the whistle with this shit. You are slandering people.
Tell you what really gives Christianity a black eye is this right here. And lately the old IFB's been in hot water for this because different journalists and reporters have been putting out exposés showing how they've hidden scandal. And, we as Baptists, we don't want to get a reputation like the Roman Catholic Church or something for covering up for weirdos. We need to adopt this policy. And look, there are some guys that I would classify as old IFB that are good on this. Like, for example, Pastor Stacy Shiflett, he just put out a great book called, I think, Wolves Among Lambs or something.
Okay, wow. Wolves Among Lambs. If Steven Anderson likes this guy, there is something deeply broken in his brain. Steven Anderson is about as close as a person gets to being an evil human being. Just a vile, disgusting, evil sack of shit. So if he's endorsing something or somebody, you should take a hard look at what that thing is.
Where he, takes this position right here. We got to expose the skin. So again, this is just in general. These are not exact. This is just kind of a generality of old IFB versus new IFB. So there are going to be exceptions to these things. On both sides, there are going to be exceptions to these things. I'm just giving you kind of a general overview of the differences between these two groups. Okay, so what else have we got here? Well, the old IFB is pretty pro-Republican in their politics. Like they'll really just support whoever the Republican candidate is.
That goes for the new IFB also. Like Jonathan Shelley. I mean, there isn't a mandate to vote for any particular person or to vote at all, honestly. But they all do vote, and they all vote for Donald Trump. And what's more, whether they vote or not, they believe in all of the Alex Jones conspiracy theories and all of the shit that comes along with it. All of it. They are far-right fascists. So whoever you think a far-right fascist is going to vote for, that's who the NIFB is going to vote for.
I mean, I don't care if it's a Mormon. I don't care if it's, just a totally wicked person in their personal life. It doesn't matter what their policies are. It doesn't matter what they'll do. They have this kind of lesser of two evils attitude, and they end up being very pro-Republican.
I know that a lot of people have a problem with the lesser of two evils bit, but that's how you need to vote when you're voting. That is how the American political system works until we get rid of the first past the post system that we're under right now. We need to do the lesser of two evils bit.
Whereas the new IFB tends to be against both parties and just has a position that says, look, both of these parties are so far from righteousness, so far from the limited government that our founders envisioned that...
Okay, the founders didn't envision government the way that it is now, certainly.
We can't get behind either of them because the Republican Party is just for big government. It's totally become immoral. And
so you're okay with them? You would rather Republicans or the Republican Party be opposed to abortion regulation then, is what you're saying, right? Because that's big government getting involved in people's lives unjustifiably. You're saying no more big government making decisions for abortion. Is that right?
And wicked in so many ways. And also what would go hand in hand with this is that, the new IFB is typically more anti-war and kind of more of a...
Anti-war, he says.
A Ron Paul type Republican view. And we're against the military-industrial complex and the warfare state,
No. I'll tell you what they are really. Somebody drew this distinction out for me recently, but the NIFB isn't anti-war. They are anti-war when it's convenient to them. So they're all in for certain wars, certain political conflicts and things. But when it's something that they don't like Ukraine, for example, they don't want to fund it. I'm not pro-peace. I am pro-justice. I want people to be given an opportunity to, let me rephrase. I want people to be given like the land that they currently own, for example. Like Russia has no right to the Donbass or the Donetsk or Luhansk regions. Peace would be letting Russia have it. But would it really be peace? He would just go in and take more. To have real peace, you need to have justice. You need to make sure that people are facing consequences for their militaristic, violent behavior. Steven Anderson isn't in favor of justice. He's in favor of peace, which oftentimes means fucking somebody over that he doesn't like.
Call us conspiracy theorists or whatever. Whereas the old IFB tends to be more hawkish and just kind of towing the Republican Party line on those type of issues. All right, and then the next thing is that the old IFB is pretty big on using birth control. Okay.
Pretty big on it? You mean they are okay with birth control? Is that what you're saying? I mean, yeah, okay. Some people are all right with birth control.
So,
the Bible doesn't say anything about birth control. So,
I mean, when I was in Bible college, they actually had a meeting for all of the single girls where they explained birth control to them, taught them how to use birth control, and required them to go to that meeting and required them to see
I don't believe you.
A doctor that was on the staff of the college at the clinic, to get their birth control. I've heard.
No, they did not require people to do that. You're completely full of shit.
Sermons talking about how it's irresponsible for you to have too many kids and stuff like that. At the very least, 99% of old IFB just won't say anything about birth control. They just won't even talk about it. Whereas the new IFB is against birth control. Now, this is one where we're getting back to actually the roots of the IFB anyway, because if you read Dr. John R. Rice's book called The Home, which I believe was published in like 1946, and he was a big name in the old IFB. I mean, he was a really well-known, he's a household name if you're an Independent Fundamental Baptist. And John R. Rice is strongly against birth control. He has like 3 chapters condemning it in his book on The Home. So we're actually getting back to his position on that.
Again, birth control is not mentioned in the Bible, so.
The position that everybody used to have as a Bible-believing Christian. And then another big difference between the old IFB and the new IFB is that the old IFB will preach sermons where they just have like a text verse or a text of like 3 or 4 verses where they'll literally preach an entire sermon just based off that one text. So they'll read 1 verse or 5 verses at the beginning of the sermon, and that's literally the only Bible that they'll use in the entire sermon sometimes. Or maybe they'll pepper in a verse or 2. Maybe you'll turn to 2-3 places. If you're lucky, you might.
I mean, can't you derive important messages from each verse?
Get 8 or 10 Bible verses or something in a sermon. Whereas in the new IFB, there's a lot of Bible in the sermon. The sermons are a lot more expository by nature, going verse by verse through the Bible. And typical sermons amongst the new IFB will have approximately 50 to 60 verses in them. If you stop and count the Bible verses in a lot of these sermons, you're going to find somewhere between 40 and 60 verses in the majority of sermons, either quoted from memory or read out loud in toto, 40 plus verses, as opposed to maybe just a text verse or a little text that they read at the beginning, and then they don't use a whole lot of Bible after that. Another big difference between these two movements is that the old IFB is into Bible college, okay? They want you to go to Bible college, and this is a big thing for them, whereas the new IFB believes in being trained for ministry in the local church, okay? So if you want to become a pastor, if you want to become a missionary, If you want to go into full-time Christian service, then you actually just get that training in your local church. And also the pastors in the new IFB believe in teaching all the heavy Bible doctrine just in church.
I think that's perfectly fine. Why wouldn't you do that? I mean, Jehovah's Witnesses are expected to know and understand heavy Bible doctrine. And sometimes they have talks where they get into it pretty deeply, but it's more memorization than thinking over anything. Aside from that, another thing that these people do is they go soul winning, quote unquote. The NIFB, they have a tendency to door knock. I'm not sure if the IFB does that, though.
Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, they'll teach the heavy doctrine. Whereas the old IFB will shy away from some of that doctrine and say, hey, you got to go to Bible college to learn that stuff. So Bible college versus local church. And then obviously another big difference is Christian school versus homeschool.
Oh my God. If you don't know Steven Anderson's history, he's got like 12 kids or something. A ton. And they're all, I don't want to say that they're all like this, but many of them, or at least some of them, are Nazis. Full-blown, self-avowed, extremist, Nazi nutcases. Isaac is one of them. I believe that they were all named after a Bible character. But anyway, they all exposed Steven Anderson for being an abuser, so I appreciate that about what they did. But they're not good people. Those kids are not. They're adults now, pretty much, most of them. Anyway, as I was saying,
the difference is Christian school.
He homeschooled all or most of them. I don't remember if it was all of them. Zhuzhana, actually, his wife, homeschooled them, and they are weirdly into German language, Germany. They speak the language, I believe. They have German citizenship. Isaac does now. Like, he went to Germany and got citizenship and everything. Like, it's really, really weird. And if they knew what type of person he was, they'd probably be jailed if he went there for some of the shit that he says. Anyway, he homeschooled almost all of them, is my point.
Versus homeschool. Okay. So, the new IFB is all about homeschooling, whereas the old IFB is into the Christian school. And not only is the new IFB into homeschooling, but we're also into not vaccinating our children.
Yeah, conspiracy theories, generally.
And taking a more alternative view to medicine sometimes.
Alternative. And what you mean by alternative is wrong.
Such as having home birth and, breastfeeding the baby. And
that's not alternative. Home birth is dumb as dog shit. I was a home birth. It's really fucking stupid. Why would you do that? My mom went full-on crunchy mommy with me, where when I was little, I'm not even sure if I was vaccinated. I don't know. She used supplements and homeopathy, and I had like a homeopathic medicine and a homeopathic doctor when I was little too. Dude's name was Dr. Shevin, and he got into homeopathy because he was convicted of negligent homicide or something, because he, as a doctor, did not take steps to protect certain people from things that he absolutely knew would kill them, and they died. And he was like, he had his medical license stripped and everything, the whole 9 yards. He lost it all. And he became a homeopathic doctor as a result. Miriam and Rachel are not like the brothers. Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. I covered some of their stuff, Miriam and Rachel. I don't really remember like much about what they had to say or what their political stances were or whatever. But some of the, I'm proud of the kids for standing up to him, because he's violent and evil. But some of them have some pretty backward views. That is an understatement, of course. Anyway, yeah, like I said, I'm not even sure if I'm vaccinated. I think I am. And if I found out that I wasn't, then I would definitely go get vaccinated. But yeah, I had chicken pox when I was little. She took me to a chicken pox party, and I got chicken pox, and it was fucking miserable. I mean, I got pox from the party or whatever. She didn't take me to infect others. I remember I was little. I was 4 or 5, and I remember having it. It was just it was a nightmare. Oh my God. And now I'm susceptible to shingles as a result. Thank you for that one. Anyway, the quote unquote alternative medicine, it's a bad idea. Don't do that. It's dumb as dog shit. If alternative medicine worked, it wouldn't be alternative medicine. It would be medicine.
And doing things more naturally and holistically, whereas the old IFB is more just kind of a standard vaccinate and just follow whatever the mainstream medical ideas are of the day. So
fucking stupid, man. I'm sorry.
Anyway, this is not conclusive or exhaustive. I'm sure that there are a lot of things that I missed or didn't think of. But let me just say this, the new IFB inherited a lot of good things from the old IFB, the King James, the soul winning, the hard preaching, the clothing standards, the traditional music, the sound Baptist doctrine of salvation by faith alone, eternal security of the believer, the Trinity, and the verbal inspiration of the Bible, the preservation of the Bible, all these great doctrines that we've kept. And then these things that we've changed, the things that we've actually deviated from what the old IFB had done in the previous generation, are an improvement in every case. If you actually compare these things side by side, you'll see that in every case we've gotten closer to the Word of God. We've actually tightened things up.
No. You have gone deeper into this weird little rabbit hole where you are convinced that you are correct about this shit when you're not. There's no reason to believe any of this.
And improve things. Like take Posttrib versus Pretrib. So they have this escapist, weak, watered down pre-trib rapture doctrine of basically we get to leave before it all hits the fan and before the Antichrist starts persecuting Christians and killing Christians. So it's this escapist fantasy. We have the realistic biblical view of a post-tribulation rapture where we're going to go through the persecution and tribulation and suffering that leads up to the second coming of Christ, as opposed to the old IFB that's just like, hey, any day now, we can just go from our comfortable American life, just boom, we're up in.
Interesting. So he's saying that the new IFB believes what exactly about this? Let me just step back 15 seconds.
Christians and killing Christians. So it's this escapist fantasy, pre-trib rapture doctrine of basically we get to leave before it all hits the fan and before the Antichrist starts persecuting Christians and killing Christians. So it's this escapist fantasy. We have the realistic biblical view of a post-tribulation rapture where we're going to go through the persecution and tribulation and suffering that leads up to the second coming of Christ, as opposed to the old IFB that's just like, hey, any day now, we can just go from our comfortable American life, just boom, we're up in heaven like that.
So I wish he would have expanded on that a little bit, what his beliefs are about it.
They're splitting up the family into Sunday school and nursery. That's unbiblical. We've got the stronger position of having our babies and children in the service, listening to preaching.
I don't think there's anything oppositional to having a children's area at the church. I've never heard that before.
They're watered down on the LGBT. We are,
but they're really not
taking a hard biblical line. And by the way, we take the exact same line on the Sodomites that they took in the 1990s. And, in the 1990s, the preaching that we do in the new IFB would have been at home in any old IFB church in regard to the Sodomites. As far as being Zionist and pro-Jewish, that's a new doctrine that came out in the late 1800s. And so we're just, rebooting that, resetting that to what Christians have believed before the late 19th century. So, we're just bringing that back to a biblical view. And they're so confused on that issue because, out of one side of their mouth, they have to admit that anyone who rejects Jesus Christ has God's wrath abiding on them. But then all of a sudden they're under some special blessing from God, even though they reject and hate Jesus. Doesn't make any sense.
I think I agree that Jews have been replaced by Christians in the Christian theology. Like, I think that's the more accurate way of interpreting Christian theology, in my opinion. But, you know, who am I? I'm not a Christian.
When it comes to hiding the scandal, I mean, come on, any idiot knows that that's a stupid policy to have and that they should be exposing it. Pro-Republican, come on. The Republican Party isn't what it used to be. Birth control, again, that's modernistic, worldly, covetousness.
Like, why do you say this? I don't understand where he's getting all of this. Birth control is like covetous and evil and all of that.
That led us into that junk. We've tightened that up and gotten more conservative on that, using more Bible, local church, homeschool. We are more conservative in every area. They are.
Yeah, I suppose you could say you're more conservative in every area, but that doesn't mean more correct in every area.
Are watered down. They have gotten more progressive and liberal. And let me just make a prediction about the future of the Independent Fundamental Baptist movement. All of Independent Fundamental Baptists, whether they lean more new IFB or whether they lean more old IFB, let me just make a prediction, is that they're going to go one of two directions, okay? The old IFB cannot continue the way it is for long. It's dying. It's on the decline. Okay, most of the churches are getting smaller.
Okay, I think that's just because churches generally are shrinking. But is he going to say that like the NIFB is getting larger because people like believe in his stuff more? I think that things are becoming more polarized right now in society generally, but particularly in religious environments. So I think that like people who are part of moderate churches that aren't completely out of their fucking heads, they're just leaving. Like they don't feel the need to be a part of this anymore. And the people that don't leave or that do fall deeper into this, they're just going head first in. They are ready to go all the way, and they go completely nuts.
Struggling. They're having trouble getting new churches off the ground in many cases. They're going to have to either go one of two directions, and we're already seeing this happen. And I've been predicting this for over 13 years now. I've been predicting that this is what was going to happen, that it's going to go one of two ways. There's going to be a group within the Independent Fundamental Baptists that want to tighten things up, get back to the old paths, preach hard, endure the persecution, stand tall, and full speed ahead, ramp up the soul winning, don't scale it back. That crowd, that's the new IFB, by the way, that I'm describing, okay? There's going to be that crowd, and then there's going to be the crowd that invigorates their movement by going liberal. And that's what we're seeing. A lot of Independent Fundamental Baptists now.
Going liberal. I guess being a liberal is not a Christian quality, huh?
They're ditching the clothing standards. They're ditching the traditional music. They're ditching the King James only. They're scaling back the soul winning. They're not preaching hard. So they're ditching all this stuff. So basically,
I'll tell you the real difference. The IFB is traditional extremist nutcases, and the NIFB, they are violent Nazis. They're both extreme, but one is like off the rails insane.
IFB just needs to come to grips with the fact that...
By the way, whoever had chicken pox when you were a kid, welcome. I might get shingles one day, club. Yeah, I know. I know that I need to get a shingles vaccine, but they're actually very difficult to find. Like, I've gone to the pharmacy. Every time I go to a pharmacy, a new one, I say, do you guys have the shingles vaccine that I can get? And they're like, we have to order it. You got to sign up on the website and, all that other shit. Like, it's such a pain in the ass to get a vaccine sometimes. I wish it were easier. Cade the Squirrel, welcome. Thank you for the super chat. There's no nuance to this. You either support people's right to be who they are, believe what they want as long as it doesn't hurt other people, or you're wrong. It's literally binary. Yeah, I agree for sure.
20 years from now, there's not going to be just a carbon copy of the old IFB. It's not going to happen. That movement has an expiration date on it. It's already expired and expiring, and it's dying. So, in order for the IFB to grow, it has to be renewed, revived, reinvigorated. That's what the new IFB is. It's a revival, a renewal, tightening things up, and it's an IFB for this generation. Okay. It's an IFB that's spirit-led now, today in 2019, being led by the Holy Spirit. Whereas, okay, the other idea that people have for reinvigorating, renewing is basically, hey, let's bring people in by watering things down. But if you just want to have a carbon copy.
God, I can't believe somebody would say the IFB waters things down. The IFB of all groups.
Of the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s IFB, and you just want to keep that going until Jesus comes, it's not working. It's not going to work. And that's why the churches are getting smaller, they're failing, they're struggling, because God expects us to grow. If we're not growing, we're dying. Okay? If we're not learning, we're getting dumber. So you can't just lock it in and...
Well, not technically. I mean, that's true in some very specific circumstances, but I don't know about this one. Whatever.
Freeze it in and, hey, we're all going to be carbon copies of John R. Rice, and we're going to be carbon copies of Jack Hyles, and we're going to be carbon copies of whoever their heroes are from the previous generation, Lee Robertson. And hey, these guys did a lot of great things, but you can't just be a carbon copy of them. We need men of God for this generation. And in this generation, things are going two ways. You either get on board with the new IFB that's learning and growing and tightening things up, fixing the mistakes of the previous generation, and, looking forward to doing new and great things for God, but staying with the old stuff, staying with the old paths, but just correcting things that needed to be corrected, that obviously needed to be corrected. That
like being a massive scumbag, right?
They're not biblical. Or they're going to ditch all the good tradition and just become totally feminine, lame, watered down. And that's what most of the IFB Bible colleges are churning out now. A bunch of pink and lavender shirt wearing, sissified.
Dude, what's wrong with pink and or lavender shirts?
Preachers that can't preach their way out of a wet paper bag, and they just can't wait.
Do preachers commonly find themselves in a situation where they need to get out of paper bags? And when they are in those situations, is there a scenario set up in which they have to preach to escape? I've never heard of this. This is news to me.
For the old timers to die off the scene so they can switch to the new King James and they can bring in the worldly music and ditch the clothing standards. I mean, they've already ditched the clothing standards in a lot of these places. It's already happening. It's already going contemporary and liberal. So anyway, I hope that this video kind of helps you understand where we're coming from as the quote-unquote new IFB. And look, new IFB is not even really like a thing. I mean, it's not an organization that anybody joins or anything.
It really is. It is, actually. I mean, you can pretend it's not all you want. You may not have even had that vision when you started it or whatever, but it absolutely is that now, and you can be kicked out of it. And I've seen that happen with Alvarez, if nobody else. That shit happens all the time with the with the NIFB.
It's just basically when you step back and look at it from the outside and you look at Independent Fundamental Baptist, you kind of see that there's a certain group of Independent Baptists that are different than the rest. And it's a new resurgence, revival, renewal. So that's come to be called the new IFB. And then everybody else is just kind of the old IFB, the IFB of the previous generation. And so, this will help you to understand some of the similarities and differences, I hope. God bless you. Have a great day.
Anyway, yeah, wow, there it is. That's kind of interesting. If you ever wondered what was different about the two, the answer really is Steven Anderson is f***ing insane and honestly genuinely needs mental help, for real. Anyway, tell me what you think about it in the comments.